Today we're going to be repairing a bleeder valve on our radiators before the winter season gets here. As you can see, that is a valve that stripped off, and the reason you have to keep these bled is because they won't rust with just water in them. There has to be air introduced, or oxygen, and if you don't bleed all the air out of the top of them a couple of times a year, they'll rust through. And I'll show some of the other ones that actually have the bleeder valves. Here's the hallway radiator, and you can see they all have a turn-off valve. And then this is how you bleed this one. You remove this brass cap, and then you have a key, and the key goes in the end and opens it, and it bleeds out the bottom. This is our boiler, or our heater for the radiator system. And we're down in the basement, and this system has a pair of pipes go to each radiator, and this has no pump on it. It simply operates on that warm goes up and cold goes down, and so this supplies all the heat, and it is non-pressurized. It's called an open atmosphere system. Up on the third floor there's a tank, an expansion tank, that I'll show you. So to drain the system, we're going to hook a hose to that valve right there and drain the system all the way down. This is the expansion tank, and obviously this is the highest point in the system. You can tell it was installed before 1919 because there's no welds, only rivets. And you can see on the sight glass that the water is halfway up. When the system expands, it goes 3/4 of the way up. So as we drain the system, that'll drain all the way down. When we fill the system back up, we'll hang out up here until the water starts coming in the sight glass. So here is what we've came up with as a fix. This is what we're going to replace it with, because 3 of our radiators don't have the original bleeder valves like these. Like this one here. This is one of the original bleeder valves, and it has a cap, and then it drains here. And these are 1918, 1919, but I can't find any, and so that's why we're rigging up the other bleeder valve like we're going to do, because we weren't able to get the air out of it, this other one. Back to this one, we haven't been able to find any, but we're keeping our eyes open, because I think we have 3 that don't have the originals. But I had to do something to this one because I couldn't bleed it, and so from the boiling water downstairs, that creates air bubbles, and the air bubbles rise, so these get air bubbles in the top of them, and it'll rust them out from the inside out. Fortunately, this system is not pressurized and does not have a motor or a pump that pumps water through it, so it's not pressurized. So if you do get a pinhole or something, it's easier to fix with brazing. But that'll be our valve, and we'll fill the system back up. So the easy out did not work, and so I drilled it until I started to see the beginning of threads, and then I chiseled the piece out. So we're gonna fill the system back up with water. This boiler we think is from about 1978, but it still works fine, and we use it because the steam heat, or the hot water heat, is over twice as efficient as the forced air system. We have about 4,000 square feet, and we heat 4,000 square feet for less than what we used to use a forced air system and heat 1,200 square feet. So it's interesting on these systems, this plumbing has been brought up to code, and so here's the pipe coming from the water supply, and you have one valve, and then it comes down and goes to a second turnoff. In between those 2 turnoffs, you have a one-way valve, so that water from the boiler system can't backflow into the main water supply. Used to, that wasn't code, but that is code now. And then you also have 2 pressure relief valves, or 1 pressure release valve right there, which is set to about 15 psi. And naturally, because the system's not pressurized, actually that one is set to 30 psi because the system's not pressurized. If for some reason this valve fails and it backwashes, then it dumps it out an overflow valve. And then we have a pressure valve, which this system, the overflow tank is on the 3rd floor. So the water column, it creates about 12 pounds of pressure. A normal hot water heating system will create about 6 psi per 20 feet tall of water column for an average radiator system that holds about 300 gallons. So we will turn on the water and we'll fill the system back up, but we have to be cautious because our water pressure here is about 50 psi, and so as we fill it up, we don't want the bottom, the 1st floor radiators, exposed to 50 psi as it forces the water on up the water column, because it's an old system, over 100 years old, and we don't want to put any undue stress on it. So we will turn the water on down here. And then we will go over here and turn it on. And we're not going to turn it on a lot. We're going to let it take its time to fill it up. And then as it fills up, we can kind of tell how full it's getting by the pressure gauge over here. As the pressure gauge rises, of course it's just registering the pressure of the water inflow now. But once it starts getting up to about 6 psi, then we know it's past the 1st floor. As it fills up, we're just going to keep an eye on every radiator. Most all these radiators are in great condition with the exception of 2. That at one time they couldn't get them bled, so they formed a little rust. So this is the one in the parlor. The last one was in the dining room. This is the one in the parlor, which has been painted, which will be stripped. And it's a little dark, but this is the one in the entryway. Of course, this one back here is the one in the den. And if you notice, everywhere there's a radiator, there are pipes that go up to another radiator, and for every radiator down here, there's a radiator right above it, and each radiator has its own set of pipes. Here is the radiator in the maid's quarters, and since this is the highest point in the house, we also had the expansion tank, and this room hasn't been renovated yet, so this is what it looked like when we moved in. Paneling and wallpaper. This room has been renovated, and this is another small radiator, and this was in the upstairs bathroom. As you can see, we've done a complete preservation on this radiator. And this is the radiator in the master bedroom. This is the radiator in the den, which the cats like to sleep on top of. And this is the radiator in the main spare room. And there are no radiators on the 3rd floor. This is the expansion tank, the highest point in the system. And if it overflows through a pipe that goes down into the basement that comes out on top of a 240 volt outlet that's conveniently placed. But anyway, we'll wait for the water column to rise in here. We'll go way up with it, because as we bleed each radiator, it'll go down. And this thing's old. You can see where it's got corrosion that's going to go through the cast iron. But fortunately, it's unpressurized, so stuff like that can be ground down. And you can get your torch and your brazing rod and braze stuff in pretty easy on that. Or, since it's not pressurized, you can actually just use JB weld. And that works just fine. That's what a lot of the guys use and love. So we'll keep an eye on this, and then we'll go bleed a few radiators. So I started filling my system back up, and as I was bleeding the 1st floor, I started having trouble getting these things to open to bleed, which I had trouble last year with them. Some of them are stripped out, some of them just plain leak. Thought I could get some more years out of them. But I'm gonna go ahead and pull them all off. I've got a few more to pull off, and basically what these are is, get focus. There's where it screws into the radiator, there's a protective cap, and there's where it bleeds out. What's going on with a lot of these is the seats in them are gone. And you can see that should be a screw right there. It should look like this, but it does not. So I took one apart, and basically you can't see in there, but there's a seat, and that's all it is. And then this screws against it, and you can see that once upon a time it had leather. And this leather has since dried out, but then went in there and sealed it up. And I looked on the internet a bunch last year, and I could not even find anything close to these. There's a guy in Europe has some, but they're not exactly like it. So I don't know. I'm just gonna go get some ones that'll work for now, just some modern ones at the hardware store. But I might even try to find these screws, but I have a feeling someday at an estate sale or antique store or something we'll come across some. But I'm betting you they probably want 50 or 60 bucks for these. And these people are crazy at the antique stores. They'll want 50 or 60 bucks for this, and half the time they don't even know what they are. And so we're gonna go to the hardware store, and we're gonna get about 8 or 9 of these, just valves, put on our radiators and start refilling the system up, and that's it. These are all of the air bleeder valves that came off the radiators. I tried to install them, but as you can see, most of them dripped or seeped or whatever, so I did not use any of them. I just took them all off, and I bought these little European style ones off of eBay. I think I got 12 of them for 20 or 30 bucks, and replaced all of them with those until I can come across these again, or come across some kind of innards, either the leather piece that goes in them or a rubber piece where I can rebuild them. These two were made for ones that completely failed. They look like something off a steam engine or something. But anyway, as you can see, some of these have been corroded and leaking for years, and so maybe I can find some somewhere. And in the meantime, after we got those all put back on, we bled the system. So, to bleed our system, we just watched this gauge here. Our water column equals about 12 psi. So what I do is, with all the air valves shut on all the radiators, I run it up to 12 psi. Then I go upstairs and start bleeding them one at a time. Air comes out, this goes back down to 0, fill it back up to 12 psi, go back upstairs, start bleeding the radiators. When I start getting water out of them, then I know the first floor is full. Usually then that gives me 6 psi. And then I just do the same with the second floor. Run it up to 12 psi, start bleeding them one at a time, let all the air out, because as the water comes up the water column, it traps the air inside the radiator. So if you don't bleed them, the gauge can make you think they're full, but they're really not. And then once they're all bled, then let the water column go all the way up to the expansion tank. After we got all the radiators bled, we came up and I put my little home security camera up here, so as I fill it up in the basement, I can watch the water column go up. And I fill it up about a quarter of the way, and then once the water expands, it'll go about 3/4 of the way, and it'll go up and down as it cycles between hot and cold, hot and cold. Here's what the little new valves look like. They're tiny and super inconspicuous, which I don't like. I kind of like the big old brass ones that run there. And this radiator hasn't been refinished yet. This is one in one of the upstairs bedrooms that hasn't been refinished, and when they get refinished, we polish out all the brass, and I refinished the oak knob on there. But that is one of, I think one of about 12 we have, but they're all good to go. We'll light the pilot light. We'll cycle them through a couple of heat cycles, and then as the water circulates in them, that will put a few more air bubbles, and then we will rebleed them. Thanks for watching the radiator video, guys. If you have any questions, post them in the comments section. I know the video jumped around a little bit because originally I was just going to replace one or two of the valves that didn't work, and so obviously a bunch of them leaked, so I just didn't even reuse them. Ended up ordering those little European valves off eBay. So they're all buttoned up, good to go, no leaks in the system. It's a super old system, super old radiators. So it requires a lot of attention. But sorry I skipped around in the video so much. And I know this video probably doesn't apply to a lot of the people, because most systems are pressurized or have a circulator pump, also have pressure tanks that you air up with air pressure. These open atmosphere systems were the earliest system. And also this system was originally fired with a coal burning system, where they'd have coal delivered and they would put it in a furnace, and the furnace had a heat exchanger, and so the coal would boil the water. But any questions or anything on this system, give me a holler. I don't know anything really about modern steam systems at all. Just this open atmosphere system is really all I know about. And I posted the video once, and a couple folks wanted me to show the basement in our 1865, 1870 circa Victorian Italianate in historic Leavenworth, Kansas. So I'll give a small tour of the basement and coal room and workshop. So we're in the kitchen, and originally there would not have been a staircase to go downstairs. It would have been an outside entrance, and so this staircase was added, we think, in the early 1900s. But anyway, this takes you down into our basement, which is kind of a basement, but it's a workspace. And you can see this is the bottom of the foundation. It's over 3 feet thick, and still all the original stone. And then of course this goes out to a backyard. So this is the main room, like a laundry room and stuff like that. And then we go in here to where the boiler is. And originally this had a huge coal-fired boiler here at one time, and then that was used to heat the house. Before that, the house was heated with the coal-burning kitchen stove, and the coal-burning fireplace is all that heated it. And so I'm not sure what all. I know this used to be all dirt floors in here. But then this is kind of part of my workshop with the boiler. And yes, we had asbestos encapsulation done when we moved in. They wanted us to remove the asbestos, but then if you start doing a little digging on people that restore homes, it's a big no-no to remove it, because once you start shaking the stuff loose, there's really no way to ever get all of it out. But encapsulation is what they like for you to do, because undisturbed asbestos never hurt anyone. So anyway, and then this is one of the other rooms. We're not sure what this room was either. I guess just a basement room. And these all had dirt floors, but somebody poured concrete a long time ago. This door right here, you can kind of see, was where they would shovel the coal from the coal room. And the coal room would have been this room right here. And the truck would have pulled up, and coal would have come in that door right here. And you can still see some of the cribbing And this entire open area here would have been filled with coal, and then it would have been shoveled through that little area there. And that's it. And actually there's still one of the old gas lamps down here where they would have had a gas lamp where they could have worked, or could have seen what they were doing as they were shoveling the coal.